I've heard some people suggest that Russia is starting to push Ukraine on all these different flanks and in all of these different directions, in an effort to tip the Ukrainian army over the edge. So I guess the theory is that Ukraine lost much more than what has publicly been stated through the summer offensive, and without this new money and another wave of tanks and armored personnel carriers and guns and stuff coming to Ukraine, they're close to the breaking point. So that's the theory behind this kind of mindless pressure that we're seeing. All up, more than just these places that you've mentioned. There's attacks south of Donetsk near at a town south of Marinka. There's also Vuhledar. There's attacks close to Kupiansk, all up and down the front line, none of which are making real big progress at all. Like, we're talking on a weekly basis is one of the things that I've been measuring. I mean, 10 square kilometers to 20 square kilometers a week over the last couple of weeks for Russia. It's not anything to brag about when we're talking about a country of millions of square kilometers. So do you think that it's possible that Ukraine is much weaker than is being reported in Western media based on some of this information, the urgency of getting funding and things like that?
The short answer is no. I do think it's entirely possible that is true, because, like you, I don't have an inside track to Ukraine. I think there's a much more plausible explanation for this, though. I mean, first of all, Russia has a really odd system in the military where, unlike in the US and the UK, we have commanders in tents. So what the commander is trying to achieve, and that can be interpreted by the guys on the ground doing whatever they need to do. It's pretty evident that from the information we have available, that Russia's political ambitions are to seize the Donbass. And mindful that you should take every advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself in war, if the world's attention is diverted away from Ukraine, then put everything on black, which appears to be what Russia is doing. It's never cared about the number of casualties that it suffers, and therefore push. The reason I'm more skeptical about your proposal, though, is that there's a lot of the military bloggers from Russia who are concerned that Russia should actually be mobilizing. They're running out of people, and they are very close to breaking. Morale is low. With the winter, the wet, the cold, the misery, they've got barricade troops, so their own troops are shooting at them if they turn around and run. But one of the reasons that President Putin will not do another mobilization, or really doesn't want to, is obviously he's got these presidential elections next year. Now, whatever a sham they might be, the last thing he needs is to have some sort of revolution on his hands. And he will have been worried after Yevgeny Prigozhin marched on Moscow, just how far he got. He will be worried that how much can he rely on his authority to stay in power. And if he did another round of mobilization, already there are a lot of families who've now lost loved ones, but because Putin controls the media inside Russia, nobody really knows the numbers that have been lost. If you do another round of mobilization, the prevailing view is that actually they'll all start to smell a rat. So I think part of this is push whilst you've got the chance. We are going to the other way of answering this, again with bouncing around a bit, Ian, is that Russia, if you ask most Western leaders, Russia has lost. And I sort of ask why, because it's got territory, and they say yes, it will end this war with more territory than it started, full stop. If that is your metric of success, then Russia will have succeeded. But President Putin was pretty clear that what he wanted to do was stop NATO's expansion. And NATO has expanded as a direct result of his war. Putin wants to make Russia great again. Well, actually, it's a pariah on the world stage. And as we talked about earlier, its standing is lower. He wanted to make the economy great again. The economy has taken a massive hit as a result of this war. Millions of people have fled the country to avoid the draft. He's going to have 100,000 dead bodies, 100,000 people who have going back without limbs and legs. I don't know what it's like in your country, but Afghanistan, that's 20 times the number of people that 200 times the number of people we had in a similar situation. And that caused huge difficulties for the economy. And finally, President Putin is indicted by the International Criminal Court. So this is not a situation that he can recover from quickly. So yes, I think Putin will be incentivized. There's part of him who will think he wants to play the long game, but actually there's also part of him that goes, he's had an extremely bloody nose as a result of this. And actually, if he can withdraw, claim victory, that's probably not a bad outcome for him. And therefore, this final push to get the remains of the Donbass that he doesn't have, try not to lose the land bridge between Crimea and the Donbass. But if he does, that's not what he wanted. He wanted to make sure he secured the Crimea and secure the Donbass. And he looks on track to achieve that.
Yeah, we actually, we did talk about this more extensively. Had kind of different questions surrounding this in the previous time we spoke. I think that's probably like the one area I think that we disagree is I considered the land bridge just from viewing at the map to be the most critical part. But I mean, tomato. It's interesting what we're saying here about Putin and technically securing victory, but getting a bloody nose in this war is one of the reasons why my conclusion was that this time period, like right now, the next couple months might be the best opportunity we get for some kind of peace agreement in a while. And we're starting to see this in the mainstream media. We have press saying that, leaked government officials are saying that there's European countries and the Americans are both putting pressure on Zelensky to talk to the Russians. There's peace talks being held in Malta. I've heard mixed informations on that, on whether the Russians are actually participating or not. Of course, all of these peace talks say that they're following along with Zelensky's plan, but Zelensky's plan, only worked if they would have recaptured Zaporizhia and reached the Sea of Azov, which none of that happened. So that seems to be, what do you Brits say, folly. So what's the chance that so it seems like the West would accept some kind of peace at this time. It seems more likely on the Western side from the people supporting Ukraine, not Ukraine itself. And then we have the possibility of Russia accepting peace. We talked about that a little bit last time, how they might not be ready for it because they might want a little bit more, but they've gotten this bloody nose. So what do you think it's possible? I'm sorry, this is a long-winded question, but do you think it's possible that Russia would accept peace or accept a ceasefire at the current front lines, along with some kind of economic incentive to push it over the edge? Maybe access to SWIFT banking again, or lifting sanctions on oil and gas, things like that. Do you see that as a possibility, that the West would give that up, or that Russia would accept that?
Well, I think it's interesting how you framed that. I think from a West perspective, there's all sorts of reasons why we want the war to end. Both, not only are we running short of weapons, we don't have the weapons to give. It's not like you can go down to the supermarket, Walmart, and buy a load of weapons. They just aren't there. Likewise, there is a danger, I think, that the West is looking at I wouldn't say failure, but the lack of progress with the spring offensive, and saying, well, if you can't make progress when we've given you virtually everything you need, is there a danger that by continuing to support Ukraine, we are fueling a war that can't be concluded? And therefore, we are complicit in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people more dying. So I absolutely recognize that from a West perspective, we don't live in Ukraine. It's largely a piece on the chessboard. we've sort of gone, right, yeah, we've had enough of that now, come to a peaceful accord. Finland did it in the Winter War, they ceded some territory and it flourished. That's great as an academic conversation. The trouble is that the war will only end when either Russia wins or Ukraine wins, or they both exhausted, they're in a stalemate, and they're both incentivized to find some resolution. That's the harsh reality, and it looks very unlikely Russia will win. It would have to subjugate the whole of Ukraine, and it's almost certain the West would never let that happen. And besides, Ukraine has a lot more incentive to fight, and whilst Russia has a greater number of people to throw at the fight, they're not well motivated, whereas the Ukrainians are. From a Ukraine perspective, it wants to liberate the whole of its territory. Again, that seems incredibly unlikely that it's going to do that. Yes, it may be able to roll Russian forces back. Yes, the land bridge looks the most likely area it could do that. But would it be able to liberate Crimea? Very few Western analysts believe that's going to be very easy to do. And will it be able to liberate the Donbass? The Donbass, even if it could, it's been shark-infested custard there for the last 8 years. There's been wars. It's right next to the border. It's almost ungovernable. So, really, so neither side's going to win, and therefore, would they compromise at the moment? Well, President Zelensky, despite the fact that his chief of the Ukrainian military has sort of written papers and spoken about what would be needed for Ukraine to shift the deadlock, and that's been interpreted as we're stuck. President Zelensky's been really clear, we're not prepared to negotiate. And from a Putin perspective, however much he might be tempted, the prevailing view is that he's gambling on Western support atrophying, and particularly given that a change of administration in the US, your presidential elections are due next year. If there is a change of administration, then there is a distinct possibility that the tap of aid to Ukraine will be turned down significantly. And that is something. Why on earth, if you were Putin, why on earth would you call a halt now when you have the potential to be able to make bigger gains next year? And you've got time on your side. You always have done. So I don't yet buy into the idea that I do accept that from my perspective, your perspective, and probably the West perspective, let's call a halt. Let's find a way of solving this. But the guys who are involved, the key players, it's difficult to see how they're ready yet to find any form of compromise.
Hey guys, it's the editor guy here. And before you go, consider joining the Telegram channel and gain news from Ukraine, Israel, and world events around the world. First, all you have to do is scroll down to the description below, click on the Telegram link, and you'll have access to all news around the world. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy it. See ya.